Charlie Campbell, it's going to be great to have you back in Australia for just another visit. It's you become a regular visitor. You're a frequent flyer to Australia.
I love Australia. I love coming to Australia and New Zealand and the South Pacific. I try and make it an annual thing because it gets me away from the English winter, basically. That's my main reason for coming. And also, I love Australian people, and Australian people love reggae, and appear to love UB40. So, that's why I keep coming back.
But reggae is an interesting thing to talk about because reggae, when UB40 started, wasn't really a thing, was it? You are probably one of the pioneers of commercialising reggae music for the Western world.
Well, that was our mission, when we started the band. We called ourselves a jazz dub reggae band. Nobody knew what dub was at all, and we were the first band to get a dub album in the charts. And when that happened, it was Present Arms in dub, which was our second album that had done really well. And we thought, wow, so, we got a big hit with Present Arms. Why don't we now show people what dub music is? And we did Present Arms in dub. And it was brought back in droves by the people who bought it, going, it's faulty, there's something wrong with it, there's no vocals on it and all that. So we've always wanted to promote reggae and promote dub. And especially in America, it was very difficult to promote reggae as a multiracial band because when we started, they still had black radio and white radio, so we didn't fit on either. So they were about 5 years behind the rest of the world, when we went to number one in all around the world with Red, Red Wine. It took America 5 years later for it to go to number one there, and that's why it's such a big hit for us because it had two lives, So yeah, I'm proud to say that I think we've helped to promote reggae and to give people an understanding or an overstanding of what reggae music is. And I'm proud of that because it's universally loved and it's unifying, it's a music that unifies people and it's a happy dance music, so everywhere we go, we bring joy. We bring joy and leave people smiling, which is a good feeling.
Yeah, and trust the Americans to only accept you after you cover the Neil Diamond song. Had you done Song Sung Blue on your first album, you would have been famous 5 years earlier.
Sweet Caroline, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. But, they were behind because they were, basically a racist country. So we did very well everywhere else, and we continue to do so. And I'm proud of that, very proud of that.
You're a band that were making statements, and, we had people in music making statements at the time. I don't see too much about that these days with the current artists around there and, with what is happening in the world. We need a UB40 type act out of the current lot of pop stars to be talking about what was going on. But there was a lot of, political and social tension in the UK when you started up. And even the name itself was kind of political, UB40, Employment Benefits 40, the form for the dole in the UK at the time, was a statement unto itself.
Yeah, well, we were the 1 in 10, we were the disenfranchised youth of Thatcher's Britain. And sadly, a lot of our lyrics, the lyrics that we did then, are still as relevant now as they were then, songs like Burden of Shame. All you have to do is change it from Soweto to Gaza, and it's the same song. So that's sad. And I agree with you that I think that there should be more youth, talking up and, arguing with the system and all that. You get a lot of hip hop acts have got things to say, especially against the American government and the Trump sort of the happening, what's happening there. But yeah, the world is in a pretty messy situation at the moment. It's the worst it's been since the Second World War, really, and it's very sad. And you can't change anything. I know that by singing about it. It's I've learned that one. But what we can do is we can come together, you know, um, and we can let each other know we care, and that's what reggae's good for. That's why it's a unifying music, and yeah, it's a healing music.
The albums that you've had over the years, Big Love, Running Free, have had a pretty major impact on the UK chart. How much are they part of the set list that you do now?
We do a greatest hits set, and a lot of that comes from the early albums and the Labour of Love trilogy. That's where we had most of our hits. We had 40 top 20 hits in the 80s and 90s. And that's what we concentrate on because that's what people want to hear. I know if I go and see, Stevie Wonder, I want to hear, Talking Book and stuff like that. So I know that, and I've been doing it long enough to know what songs people want to hear, and we get a lot of feedback. Why didn't you play this? Why didn't you play? But we would be on stage for 7 hours if because I have made 30 albums. So yeah, we sort of concentrate on the hits. The top 20 hits that we had in the 80s and 90s. And people seem to like that, that's what they come to listen to.
Yeah, well, those covers like Red Red Wine, they've become, songs that are associated with you as much as Neil Diamond. What about Great British Songs that you recorded? That's going back and paying tribute to a lot of the British artists that were around and having hits. Does any of that pop up?
Well, no, because that album, even though it's one of my favourites, I was covering big hits anyway. What was I think special about the Labour of Love albums was that I was apart from Red Red Wine, which actually wasn't a hit for Neil Diamond, and so they say he didn't write it either. He bought the publishing from some little dude down south in America. You know what I mean? But the Labour of Love albums, we were covering why we loved reggae. That like the question we were most often asked was, why do you guys play reggae music? Well, the Labour of Love trilogy was the reason. These were the songs that made us love reggae. Cherry O Baby by Eric Donaldson and Many Rivers to Cross by Jimmy Cliff, and Red Red Wine was actually we knew it by Tony Tribe. Nobody was as surprised as us to see that we thought N Diamond was Negus Diamond or something like that. We didn't know that Neil Diamond had written it or said he wrote it or owned the publishing or whatever. So we were covering songs that people didn't necessarily know, and trying to make them popular, and it worked. Whereas with the Great British songs, we were covering songs that people knew already. They were great British songs. You know what I mean? So they were just reggae versions of, if you like. Whereas the Labour of Love songs were our versions of other songs that had already been done, but only by reggae artists, if you know what I mean.
So, a song like Cherry O Baby, were you aware that the Rolling Stones had done it just 7 or 8 years earlier on the Black and Blue album?
No, not at all. Not at all. I wasn't old enough really for the Stones, you know what I mean? It's like I grew up listening to the Beatles and the Stones, but only when I was a tiny little thing. When I became a teenager, I was into the Jackson 5 and, Stevie Wonder and Bob Marley, when I was about sort of 15 years old. So I wasn't aware of the Stones doing Cherry O Baby. I think it's a great version though. Um, um, no, but yeah, that was one of the ones that had been done by the Stones. Uh, most of them were songs that hadn't been heard by people. So that's why we chose them, because for us, they were reggae classics, but to other people, they were something else, nothing else.
How influential was your father, Ian Campbell's folk music career on what you ended up doing?
I think he gave us advice in the early days, not to take an advance. Um, we were being offered, the standard advance when we started out, and we refused that and went for points, instead. And we ended up on the same deal as Paul McCartney in England, for our first album, which stood us in good stead because we went on to sell 8 million of our first album, which is ridiculous. We'd only just learned to play our instruments, and we ended up outselling Kind of Blue, by Miles Davis and John Coltrane, the biggest selling jazz album of all time. But because of the deal that we'd got, it made it possible for us to buy our own studios and to carry on in an independent way. Even though we didn't stay independent, we went with different record companies, but on our own terms. So I think my dad helped us with that. Musically, not at all, because he was a folk musician. In fact, he came to me once and said he was Scottish, and he used to do traditional Scottish music, but he also did contemporary music. He wrote about 27 albums of his own or whatever. And he came to me once and said, "What are you doing that gibberish for, Ali?" And I says, "Dad," I said, "Hey Willie Wallachy, hey John Dougal, the late Conrochity, roo roo roo." That's gibberish. What I mean? But he was talking about, because he couldn't understand patois, you know, so he thought they were speaking gibberish, which of course they weren't. It's just they had a strong, Jamaican accents. He hated reggae. He was very disappointed that his sons were playing in a reggae band. Um, and we were kind of disappointed that he was a folk musician. Like all kids, you don't generally like what your parents like, do you?
I've talked to your brother, Robin, numerous times over the last 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
He's talking about the rift. How is that going? I mean, is that got any chance of mending?
No, not at all. No, that was all very unfortunate and very silly, and basically down to jealousy. Um, the reason I left the band was because they wouldn't give me a month off to promote my second solo album. It's as simple as that. Um, I'd made my first solo album was called Big Love, and I made that because I wanted to get an advance, and I did. I got a big advance from the record company. I held out for a big advance, non-recoupable and tax-free. So once I'd got that advance, happy days. Um, Everybody says, "Are you going to promote the album?" And I went, "Oh no, I'm not leaving the band. I've just, you can promote it." I said that to the record company, which they weren't very pleased. And the band all went, "You're crazy, go and promote it. Why don't you go and promote your solo album?" And I went, "Because I don't want to, and I didn't intend to in the first place. So then a little later on in my career, I made Running Free, which was the second solo album. This time, UB40 hadn't had a hit, top 10 hit for 15 years. So I went in at number 9 and thought, well, you know what? I'll promote this one. So I phoned up our agent at the time and checked that I had some time off, and he says that we did. So it was either June or July, I can't remember, but it was a month off. And I thought, right, I'll go and promote my new solo album in this month. And I went to see the band at one of our, meetings. And I said, I need this month off to promote the new, the Running Free album. And they said, no, you can't have the month off. I said, well, why not? I've checked that there aren't any gigs there, There'd been a few TBCs, which means to be confirmed, but I'd said to the agent, can they be moved? And he went, absolutely. So I said, well, I want to promote my album. And they went, no. And also the management were, that because one of the managers behind my back had gone to the person that was managing the solo album and said, what's in it for me and all this, and I wanted them away from it because already I didn't trust them. So when I said, all right, well, I'm off, and I gave a resignation letter in, and it started with, I don't trust this management, I don't trust blah, blah, and blah, blah. And I want out of this, this deal and everything. And that's what happened, And then since then, lots of stuff's gone down, which has all been very unpleasant and very sort of needless, So it's not going to ever be repaired, I don't think. And I'm very happy with the band I've got. I've been with this band for 20 years now. And they've been with me, and I believe we've got the best reggae band in the world. And to compare the two, I think he's daft, because I sang on all the hits, and I've got a better backing band, so I would call them a tribute band, really. And I believe that anyone that's been duped into seeing them will see the difference when they come and see me and my band, That's basically where it's at the moment here. So, no, I don't see it ever being repaired, Plus, there are a lot of things that happened, that shouldn't have. Like, they nicked my pensions and they sold my publishing behind my back without my permission and all that. Things like that went down, So, I've washed my hands of them really, and continue with my band now.
I think probably the saddest part of, the whole story with you, 2021, losing Astro. How do you carry on his spirit in the shows that you do?
Well, he left a hole that can't be filled. It's like he was Astro, and funnily enough, I was at a big low in my life, as well as sort of with the band when Astro died. And Frank Bambini from the Fun Loving Criminals, who was a friend of mine, the drummer with the Fun Loving Crimson there, he stepped up sort of thing and says, do you want me to come and be your G-man, on stage? And I went, I'd love you to, Frank, and that was kind of healing, that was cathartic, sort of having him there doing what Astro used to do. And he's also a brilliant percussionist, so he joined the band only a few years ago, and he doesn't make up for Astro's loss, of course, but he helped me deal with it. And he does have a great energy on stage, And he still plays with the Fun Loving Criminals. He still drums with them, and they still tour. They're on tour now. But then when he can, he plays with me, and he's up front on stage with me. And like I said, he's got a great energy, and people love him. And so there you go.
Well, we can't wait to see you back down in Australia. Look, you just have to look at the set list. That's a set list that you just can't fuck up, isn't it? It's just, one great song after another.
Yeah, well, we were lucky. We had, over 40 top 20 hits in the 80s and 90s, and that's the sort of set that we do because we know that people want to hear them songs. It's all thrillers, no fillers. Uh, so yeah, we can't wait to be back in Melbourne. As I said, it's been lovely watching Melbourne grow into the city that it is now. Um, and I love coming back to see what's new, you know.
It's going to be a great tour. Can't wait to see you down here. Ali Campbell, thank you for joining us here at Noise 11.
Yep, respect and big love.